Okay, Rabbi Say, let's get started. Vestos. Geschmack. Okay, so many get very overwhelmed by Vestos. It's so complicated, so complex. So basic Vestos are not so hard. Basic Vestos are pretty simple. Complicated Vestos are quite complicated. So just getting the basics down is pretty easy. Mastering it, I'm asking. That is a job. That's some amelis to master it. Now, before we even get into anything deep or anything complex, there's something that I get asked very often. People often ask me, what do I think about the app? Using the app, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is that okay, not okay? Yeah. App, it's one of those things, you know, those... Oh, there's a bunch of them. I don't know what what are they called? Mikvah calendar or something. I don't know. There's like 3 or 4 different ones. Yeah. So Haskamas. I'm gonna get to Haskamas in a second. But what's with the app? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? So I'll tell you like this. To me, it is pashid that if for anybody that doesn't master Hilchos Vestos, if you don't get it well, then the app's a great thing. Because if you're going to make mistakes and the app won't make mistakes, then the app's a pretty good thing. Now, for the person that's going to put in the amilos and learn Vestos properly, so is it better to do it yourself or is it better to use the app? Well, I think it's better to pick out your own lulav and esrog. It's better to build your own sukkah. It's better to bake your own matzahs. There's a mailah of doing something biyadayim. Now, does that mean there's anything wrong with buying matzahs and anything wrong with paying somebody to build your sukkah? Is there anything wrong with having somebody pick out for you your arba minim? There's nothing wrong with it. And it's perfectly fine to use it. But for somebody who is capable of doing it by themselves and knows the halachas, so there's a mailah, just like with those other mitzvahs that I said, there's a mailah of getting your hands dirty and doing it. So there'd be a mailah for a ben Torah to go, David HaMelech, his hands were filled with blood. He'll be Isaac, the Inyane Nida. Yeah? So there's a inyan of getting your hands a little dirty and getting it by yourself. Now, even for those that are good with the cheshbonus, depending on the person, depending on the lady, etc., the reminders from the app could certainly be a very good thing, because even if you know the halachas well, or your wife knows the halachas well, but you're a forgetful type of person, so for a forgetful type of person, that might be a positive anyways. Okay, now the one thing that concerned me a little bit, which I wasn't so thrilled to see, I wanted to look. I put into Google. I saw the first 2 things that came up. I checked the haskamas on the apps, and I was surprised to see there was no big name haskamas on the apps. I wanted to see some bigger names there. I wanted to see Rav Asher Weiss. I wanted to see Rav Belsky. I wanted to see Rav Feivel Cohn, and I didn't see them. I assume the reason why I didn't see those haskamas on the apps was because they don't want to put their names on smartphone-related entities. But I was a little disappointed not to see them. But Lamaisa, I think it's a fine thing. Don't get a smartphone to have the app. But for those that have a smartphone and do everything else on the smartphone, and the rest of their life is run on the smartphone, and you can't figure out the Vestos properly, use the app, not a problem. Okay, now let's understand what Vestos are. So Vestos, there's going to be 2 types of Vestos. There's going to be a Vest She'eina Kavua and a Vest Kavua, as we all probably know. So I'll just run through this very quick. A Vest Kavua is something that there's some degree of chazaka that it's going to come at that time, and therefore it's a time that you expect the flow to come. Whereas a Vest She'eina Kavua is something where you don't expect that the vest is going to come, but you suspect it's going to come. Meaning you have a chashash that the woman's going to be starting a new set pattern, and you have a chashash that this is, last time she saw on the 27th of the month, this time it may happen again. So Vest Kavua is the expectation, whereas a Vest She'eina Kavua is you suspect, it's a chashash, that the Riyah is going to come during that time. Now there's going to be there's a big machlokes whether Vestos d'Oraisa or Vestos d'Rabbanan. Now the Maisa, most understand that machlokes is talking within Vest Kavua, whether a Vest Kavua is d'Oraisa d'Rabbanan, whereas the Vest she'ena kavu, which is primarily what we deal with 95% of the time, 98% of the time. So ves she'ena kavua is bepashtus a derabanan, and that's how we're gonna go with it being derabanan. Now, fine. Now, one question that comes up very often is if there's when judging kesamim and trying to figure out when it counts from when to when. So, just want to the two questions that I get pretty often. I just want to put it out there right off the beginning. Is let's say you get a kesem, which is a tamei dika kesem, and then the next day the actual flow starts. Because once again, the proper nidus is the flow, the natural flow, but sometimes there's a little kesem that starts the day before, and the kesem, let's say, made of tamei. When do you mark into the calendar, or when do you put into the app, it was the re'iyah? Is it at the time of the kesem when she became aser, or is it the time of the actual re'iyah when the flow started? This is a super, super common question, because I've been asked it so many times, it must be a super common question. So, the Lamaisa, Moshe Feinstein paskins that we start from whenever the kesem is, whereas the Shevet Levi Rav Vosner says we go from when the actual flow is. And Lamaisa Misvara, the flow is actually makes Pipashas off the bat is just more balbatish, makes sense, because our chashash that we're always being choshish for is this is when her flow is gonna come. So therefore, that's what we're choshish for in Vestos. That's when she's gonna become. That's the beginning of her flow. So that's what we're usually choshish for, and therefore happens to be the minhag ha'olam is like Rav Vosner to be, unless you're in the camp of Rav Moshe, the minhag ha'olam is like Rav Vosner to count from the zman of the actual flow.
Just a kesem that was and that was it. There was no
Kesems don't. Bekitzer, after what I just said, if you're not in Rav Moshe's camp, kesems they don't get marked down as anything. They're not a riyah.
Isn't it a riot, especially if it's the next day, isn't it a riot that it started?
Okay.
By the
So no, there's a thing called a kesem which doesn't make it when there's a little bit of blood. And once again, we're talking about the woman. The woman didn't feel our gasha.
You said a tamei dika kesem.
Yeah.
So that's the biggest riot that it did start. It's not in the stomach kesem.
So a kesem.
Then you're right.
Yeah.
If it's a tamei dika kesem, so then now that's the thing.
So there's
just not full force.
Good question. A woman, when she sees her natural flow, that will make her a nida deraisa. Now, it happens to be there's a question mark, because we say to become a nida deraisa, you need a hargasha. And nowadays, most women don't seem to feel this hargasha for one of two reasons. Machlekes Rav Yashav, Moshe Feinstein. But either way, we consider a woman either that is her hargasha, or we assume that she had her hargasha, but she just didn't feel it. That's what makes her nida deraisa when she has that pure, proper flow. Having a kesem that is mitama her isn't a raya that she became a proper nida, because it's not even awesome. It's not even a nida deraisa. It's only nida derabanan when you have a kesem. So it's not the proper flow. It isn't it. It's not the real deal. Yes, you're awesome derabanan when you have a kesem, but it isn't the proper flow. But one thing that you will have to be concerned about is that if you see this happen as a recurring theme, let's say this happens 3 times, so this might be a vest haguf, which is something, for some reason, I mean, I know the reason, but it usually doesn't make it into chassan classes, the concept of vest haguf, which is if there's a clear siman on the body that this is, the onset of nidus is on the way, so this is something that could totally happen. Once again, not if it's sporadic, not if it's some days 2 days before, sometimes 3 days before, sometimes 1. But if it's always, let's say, 24 hours before the nidus comes, there's always starts a stain. So that stain might be a vesta guf. We'll get back to that later, but it's something to keep in mind. But it's not the actual flow, and therefore it doesn't get marked in the calendar. You might want to put a little note over there to be choshish. It happened. Maybe it's a vesta guf. But it's not in terms of the Vestos. Yep. Now, a very similar shayla, which comes up very often, is when you have instead of a kesem, if you have a tamei bedika cloth the day before the flow, because once again, it's very common that the flow is going to happen right around the Vestos. Makes a lot of sense. So if the day before the flow actually started, the woman did a bedika and it was found to be tamei. So do you start counting from the Tamei Bedika cloth, or do you start counting from the actual flow? And by the way, by the Tamei Bedika cloth, there's even a tzad that she's in need of deresa. It depends how you learn that we're choishish that she had a hargasha during the Bedika. I don't want to get too involved in the lumdus, but there's a machlokes whether she's considered in need of deresa after Bedika. So do you judge from the Bedika or do you judge from the actual flow? So once again over here, the Shari Toyer says you judge from the Tamei Bedika cloth, is what you mark down. The Shevet Levi says you judge from the actual flow. L'maisa, the Minhag Olam, is to judge from the actual flow. So you're going to be marking down on the calendar, unless you were told otherwise or from a different camp. But Stam, the Minhag Olam is that when you mark down on that calendar is the actual flow, not the Tamei Bedika. Now, before we discuss the calculations, which is Simin Kuf Pei Tes in the Shulchan Aruch, I want to just discuss what actually do you do on the days of a vest. What is, so it's a vest today. What does that mean? This is Simin Kuf Pei Daled in the Shulchan Aruch. So one thing that we know is you do bedikas. Why are you doing bedikas? So if you ever think about it, it's a little bit hard to understand. What did bedikas actually accomplish? Because, okay, what are you choshish for? If you're choshish for a little drop of dam, we know tipas dam kachardel, a little drop of blood is able to make a woman tamei. So at 2 points in the day, you checked and there was no blood. Does that prove there wasn't a little bit of a drop of blood the rest of the day? Not really. And if we're choshish that there's going to be a real proper flow, who needs to do bedikas anyways? She'll know. She knows when there's a proper flow. So what's the whole point of the bedikas? So it's actually very hard to understand if you stop and think about it. Because of this kasha, the Chavas Das, he has a very chumradik approach. The Chavas Das says the woman has to have a moich in for the entire oina of the vest. For 12 hours, she has to keep a moich in there. Do not try this at home. If nowadays, I don't know what the Metzias was 300 years ago? The Chavas Das is the Tzivas. How long? 250 years ago? So 250 years ago in Lita, I don't know exactly what the Metzias going on there is, but nowadays if we put a mic in there for 12 hours, it will be a very painful matzav. So we don't do that. But that was because of this kasha. You have to make sure there's no dam the whole day. Now, we don't pass in that way, definitely not. Now, so what does it accomplish? So the Chazon Ish has a lamdish approach, and the Chazon Ish has a lamdish approach, and the Netziv has a balbatish approach. The Chazon Ish says, you have a chazaka me'akara that she's tar, but neged that you have a chazaka that she's supposed to see this day. So there's a fight in chazakas. Somehow the bedika strengthens the chazaka de me'akara to override the chazaka of that the re'iyah is going to come, and memila, once she has that, she's tar. Okay, I don't really understand the Chazon Ish, but I understand a little bit. Still, you have a chazaka that you're going to see blood, so how does it really help? Tzarchi. But that's the Chazon Ish. The Netziv, he has a more balbatish approach, and he says, listen, what's the metzias of a woman? The metzias is when a woman's right before seeing, it's not like the blood comes from nowhere. The way that it is, there's a buildup of the blood in her body, and the balloon's about to pop, so to speak. So when you do a bedika, you're going in and you're going around, you're aggravating the balloon. If that balloon is in a matzav where it's about to pop, then the bedika would have made it pop. And when the bedika was done, if you don't see blood, that means the balloon wasn't about to pop. And therefore the bedika proves that she's not going to be seeing dam today. So that is the approach of the Netziv. So maybe at 2 points in the day to just show. First of all, it happens to be the second one. I don't know what the Netziv holds. We're going to get to it in a minute. It's not so partial that you need two bedikas. I don't know what the Netziv holds. Huh? We'll see in a second.
You don't know if he says you need two. Okay.
Huh? Not everybody holds you need two. I don't know what the Netziv holds. All right, so once we get into that, how many bedikas are required? So some say 1, some say 2, some say 3. How many bedikas are required? So the mashmais of happens to be the Shulchan Aruch sounds like only 1 would be required, not 2, 3, etc. However, the minhag ha'olam, I believe, is that 2 bedikas are required, even though the pashtus of the Lashon Shulchan Aruch is only 1. And once again, I don't know what the Netziv holds. Now, Let's say you do two bedikas. When are these two bedikas done? So during a day riyah, during a day aina, a day vest. So you do it once when she wakes up, and once sometime before shkia. If it's a night vest, when are you going to do it? So once after shkia, and then it's a machlekes whether you do the second one before she goes to sleep, or you do it when she wakes up. Now, if you're talking about a vest she'eina kavua, which most of the time is what we're talking about, outside of maybe an abandonness. So if you're doing a vest she'eina kavua, we generally have a rule, once the vest passes, you don't do a bedika anymore. You don't need it once the vest passes. So therefore, if that's the case, the pashtus is, this used to be more of a bigger kasha, in my opinion, when the women woke up before nates. So if she's going to wake up before nates, wake up before nates, so she should do it when she wakes up, the second night bedika. But if she's going to wake up after nates, which is what most people are going to do, but the pashtus is, once again, your place can say everything, but I'm just telling you my pashtus. I think the pashtus is you should do it at night before she goes to sleep. That's when the second bedika could be done. Now, if it's a woman that has irritation issues and etc., or the bedikas are really painful, etc., then there's definitely makom to do one bedika, because once again, that is the pashtus of the sugya of one bedika. So two bedikas is definitely the minhag. That's definitely what you do. Normal situation. If there's issues, irritations, etc., then ask a shayla, whatever. But you're going to be told by most you could do one bedika. Now, do you need a bedika by a vest she'eina kavua? So it's actually it's a machlokes really whether you need a bedika by a vest she'eina kavua. The Beis Yosef and the Pardes Rimonim say that you don't need it, whereas the Prisha, the Bach, they say you do need a bedika by a vest she'eina kavua. The Shulchan Aruch, it's not so clear. It's mashma a little bit that you do need a bedika, and the Ma'aseh Nega Olam is that we do bedikas on a vest she'eina kavua. Now, once again, if you get into a case of the pasha, that's the minhag. The minhag is two. It happens to be it's a pretty big chumrah, the two, but that is the minhag. So we're not here to change the minhag, but that seems to be the minhag, is that we do two even on a vest she'eina kavua. Once again, woman irritation, etc. Certainly by vest she'eina kavua, there's definitely room to be makel to knock that down to one. And let's say a woman has a makkah. Sometimes it happens that a woman has some form of wound, some issue, and she's not going to be able to get a clean bedika cloth. But even if the bedika cloth has dam, if you know there's a wound there, there's a scratch there, there's a problem there, that won't be matama her. So the way that by bedikas that are absolutely required, like for example the hefsek tahara, which is absolutely required, the way we do is we send the woman to a nurse who's able to go and do the bedika for her in a way of avoiding the makkah and just checking. And by the way, as a side point, it's covered by mucheret. They have them. None in this neighborhood, but you could go to whatever neighborhoods, and they'll do the bedika for you. Now, if by a vest she'eina kavua, which there's already tzadim to say that you don't need, and the shitas that you don't need a bedika in the first place, so therefore you would not. You would pass. If you're in that type of situation, you're not going to send a woman to go to a nurse to get a bedika by a vest she'eina kavua. But once again, by something that's absolutely required, like a hefsek, for example, then you definitely would. Okay, now so Or Zarua, we will not do bedikas in the Or Zarua. We will not do bedikas in the Crazy Placey. But we will do bedikas on the Chavas Das. Huh? So Or Zarua is the 12 hours before. That we're not going to do bedikas. The whole Or Zarua, I'm going to get to it in a minute. The whole Or Zarua Be'etzem is a huge chumrah. So to start requiring bedikas in the Or Zarua is a big chumrah. I'm not saying there's nobody. I'm sure there's somebody. The way that it works in Hilchos Nida is there's always somebody there. There's always somebody that requires. But I'm saying the Pashas is certainly not. Okay, one more thing. There's the Moshe Feinstein has a chumrah. Happens to be it's pretty mistaber the chumrah of Moshe Feinstein, but l'maisa it's not the minhag olam, and I'm not telling anybody to do it. The Moshe Feinstein says the woman should wear tight-fitting white underwear, the whole vest, to be mekayim the chavas das, to be able to make sure that there's no blood throughout the entire day. That's the best way in Mitzias to do it, and therefore that's what Moshe Feinstein requires. But l'maisa it's definitely not the minhag olam. Okay. Now, what about on a Yom Vest? Are you allowed to go swimming? Or are you allowed to take a bath, etc.? So there are some places that are machmir. By a vest she'in kavua, the pastor says it's not a problem, no issues. By a vest kavua, about going swimming on because the potential issue is even if there was blood, then it would just went away in the water. So Lemaisa, the Pasha says one could definitely be makel. There are machmirim. I'm just telling you there are machmirim not to go swimming, etc. But the right place where makel is no problem to go swimming or take a bath on a vest kvua. It might be an Indian to do your bedika of the day if it works out time wise to do your bedika of the day before going swimming. Once again, if it works out.
The reason is because it'll compromise the accuracy of the bedika.
Correct. The problem is that you won't know if she saw during that time. Because she could have seen while she was in the pool and you would have never known about it. If we're talking about a little drop of dam. But the Lemaisa will make on it. The Shulchan Aruch says, Kol hamar belivdaik harizem meshubach. The Shulchan Aruch says, the more bedikas you do, the better. The more the merrier. Lemaisa, the poskim nowadays all say not to follow the Shulchan Aruch of the more bedikas, the better. Then there's two reasons why the poskim say not to do too many bedikas. Don't do any extra bedikas more than you're required. Number one is because it tends to give women irritation, cause makas, and it ends up being a chumrah she'aseh l'dei kula. It's not kedai. Secondly, the issue is that nowadays we're much more machmir than we once were in colors, because our Messiah isn't as pure as it used to be, and therefore we're machmir about anything which is neitel, which is reddish, and anything that's different shades, which is much more than the ikr shades, the ikr 4 shades or 5 shades that we be'etzim, mina Gemara, mina even Shulchan Aruch, they had greater accuracy than we have nowadays. So therefore, you don't look to get yourself in more matzavim that we're going to be machmer in those matzavim. That's the approach of Moshe Feinstein. It's unclear if that approach is only for Moshe, who is extremely machmer on colors in Maris, or is that line of thought true in all the poskim? Where Moshe was very, very machmer on Maris. Fine. What about the prisha? What type of prisha needs to be done? What does it mean to be parish? Right? So we learned out, by the way, so let's skip that part. Let's see what type of prisha is required. So that. Oh, by the way, just one more thing. What is the chashash? Is the chashash that there's two possibilities of explaining the chashash. One possibility of explaining the chashash is we're choishish that this second, that's when the dam's going to come. And if we're choishish that this second, that's when the dam's going to come, so you obviously can't have tashmish during that day. It's you have the gzeira d'Rabbanan in the vest that you can't have tashmish because maybe she's going to become a nida at that second. A second way of explaining is that there's a concern that the tashmish will be goyrim the nidas to come. Either it's what the person called the warmth of tashmish, or once again, as you know, similarly to what we said, the bedika could potentially cause the bag to pop and cause the tashmish and cause the nidas to come. So too, it's possible that tashmish will cause the nidas to come, and therefore that's why it can't be done. Now, if somebody did have tashmish during a Yom Vest and the woman didn't become a nida, it's not like they're cool, they didn't do it, it all worked out. It didn't work out, you're over Issa d'Rabbanan, and somebody would need tshuva for that. Now, Lemaisa, what is Aser in Yom Vest? So tashmish is Aser on Yom Vest. Touching is allowed Yom Vest. What about Chiba v'nishik? So Chiba v'nishik on a Yom Vest is ba'atzim allowed. I mean, the Shulchan Aruch clearly says that the only thing that's asur is tashmish. So it's clear from the Shulchan Aruch that chibah v'nishik would be allowed. However, there is the Trumas Hadeshin who says that chibah v'nishik is asur on a Yom Vest, and the Bach brings down the Trumas goes with the Trumas Hadeshin. The Bach says hamachmer tavil bracha. So Zak the Bach, somebody who's machmer, not to have tashmish on a Yom Vest, tavila bracha. Now, many people, Chibah Menishik, I'm sorry, thank you. The Taz quotes the Bach, but the Taz doesn't look like, the Taz isn't mashma that he's mamish being machmer for it. The Taz brings down that there is a Bach, not with the lashon it doesn't look like a full endorsement of the Bach. But the Taz does quote the Bach who says a machmer tavla bracha. Trumas Hadeshin is the only one who brings it down as an absolute isser. Now,
It's like if you drink water outside the sukkah, inside the sukkah.
so some people teach this, therefore, and I think it's a little. I think it's a little. I don't know. I don't want to say wrong, but I think it's not accurate. A lot of people teach it. Therefore, chibur v'nishuk is aser on the Yom Vest because the Bach. I think it's a little bit inaccurate way of teaching things. The Maisa, the Iker Din Shulchan Aruch is chibur v'nishuk is mutter. The Bach says there's a Bach that a machmer tavla bracha. Is it good to be machmer with the Bach? Yeah, it falls easy and no problem. Yeah, and I would want to just divide it two things. There's chibur v'nishuk that might lead to tashmish, and there's chibur v'nishuk that won't. Chibur v'nishuk that won't lead to tashmish, there's no reason to be machmer on that. Chibur v'nishuk that might lead to tashmish, that there is reason to be machmer, and I would say a machmer tavla bracha, but a machmer tavla bracha isn't the same thing as saying it's aser. So that's just something that I would present it that way. Now, Mita achas. Mita achas, the Graz says that it's aser mita achas, and this is something that makes perfect sense. Because once again, we're choishish that something's going to come to tashmish, so therefore mita achas is going to be a problem, and the minhag ha'olam, everybody's machmer for this Graz, and we're makbid on mita achas, not to be sleeping on mita achas on a Yom Vest. However, two beds are allowed to touch. We're not generally machmer. Sidri Tahara says that we're not machmer on two beds not touching each other on Yom Vest. Even though we generally, during pure nidus, we would say two beds that are touching is considered mita achas, but when it comes to Yom Vest, we're not going to go that far as Oivait and machmer on it. Fine. I don't know if anybody argues on that. Maybe somebody does, but that's what the Sidri Tahara says. He's the only one that I have in there that says it. Okay, so let's go through the basic vestas for a second. So the first vest that we got is Vesta Chodesh. Vesta Chodesh is whatever day in the Jewish month a woman saw or Chodesh that she's going to see on that day of the Jewish month in the month to come. Now, if it's once again, as we said, there's a chashash, there we suspect. If it's 3 times, then it's more of a chazaka, it's a vest kavua, and we expect it to come on that day. One thing I should point out before I go further is that it's true, many have heard that vest kavuas, we don't have vest kavuas nowadays. I mean, it does exist, it's very uncommon. I know I've been brought to my attention 2 cases of, not nobody that I personally dealt with, but I spoke to somebody who dealt with it, vest kavua, of somebody who's mamish, consistently over years with a vest kavua, but it exists, but it's very rare. But there is something that does exist, which everybody has to be careful of and understand. When you play the slot machine, every once in a while you're going to get, cherry, cherry, cherry. So also when you play the slot machine, every once in a while you're going to get, 28, 28, 28. Or you're going to get 27, 28, 29. There's enough combinations that go on in a person's life, or multiple people. It happens. Once again, these are the type of eskavuas that usually don't last and don't extend forever, but don't have the idea, the mindset, veskavus, that's just not happening nowadays. It's statistically going to happen. Once every couple people over the course of their life, they're going to get a veskavua if they're paying attention to it at some point, because it's just, once again, when you play the slot machine, sometimes you win. So sometimes there will be veskavus. Okay, so Vesta Chodesh, back to Vesta Chodesh, as I was saying, it's that day of the month, right? And you could potentially have 2 Vesta Chodesh in a month. So let's say a woman saw on Beis, and then whatever happened, she saw on, Chaf, again, because whatever, medication, something, sick, COVID, I don't know, whatever threw her off, and she saw again. And the following, The vaccine, I'm sorry, not COVID, the vaccine. And with the tail, with the 2 Rias in a month, the ganze thing. So then the next month, she's going to have to be, it's not a steer to each other to have 2 Vesta Chodesh in 1 month. So she would have to be Chodesh for Beis and Chaf of the following month. Okay, another case which is a common complication is, what if a woman saw on Lamed? We know in the Jewish months, some months are 29 days, some months are 30 days. So what if a woman saw Lamed l'Chodesh? So if the following month has Lamed l'Chodesh, so that's all good, right? But what if the next month doesn't have a Lamed l'Chodesh? The next month is only 29 days. What does she do? So this, by the way, to me, it's a big pella that the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring down this case. And this isn't like, one of these cases that, one of these shaylas that, I don't have a kasha where the Shulchan Aruch didn't say why electricity is aser. Because there was no electricity, so I understand why the Shulchan Aruch didn't bring it down. But it's kind of strange or interesting. Why didn't the Shulchan Aruch bring down this case? And we don't have it in any of the earlier poskim. It's more of like a modern day shayla in the poskim. I can't figure out why this wasn't discussed in great depth 500 years ago. As to if it, this isn't a new thing. I'm leaving that as sarachin. I was trying to figure out terutzim. I didn't come up with anything of why I didn't find any earlier sources. More than the last 100 years or whatever, 150 years. I don't know exactly that discuss this. Okay, Lamaisa. Therefore, it's a big. The sheet is all over the place. There's one sheet that says chavtes, one sheet that says nothing. One sheet that says you got to realize Lamed is Rosh Chodesh, right? So therefore you keep Aleph the following month because it's Rosh Chodesh, right? And there's another sheet which is my personal favorite that you just keep the next Lamed that comes up. Because you have never been Oik or Lamed. You never proved that you don't see on Lamed. And if you never proved that you don't see on Lamed, you never been Oik or Lamed, so you should keep Lamed. But why should you keep Chavtes or why should you keep Aleph? What does that have to do with we never saw a sign that Chavtes causes Nidus, and we never saw a sign that Aleph causes Nidus.
That's great, but we never made a 60-day vest.
It's not a 60-day vest. It's not about a flogga. It's not about an interval. It's about which day is goyim you to see.
Yes, you can have.
So if it's not about, it's about which day is goyim. We know Yom Lamed is goyim her to see.
But no woman sees every 60.
In a chanami.
To be a Matthias is 60 days later.
In a chanami.
So the woman sees every 60
Once again, it's not a stira, Beis, and Chaf. It's not, even though it's not a normal situation, but it's not a stira to have two different days of the month that you have a vest. So when in the next month she sees on Beis, so she's going to have on that month, the one after that, Beis and Lamed.
Yeah, but how long do you have to keep this Lamed thing going on?
Until you pass a Lamed without a Riyah. Yeah? Think about it. It makes sense. But once again, there's big fights about this. I feel free to argue. Fine. Now let's go on to next. Huh? So it doesn't seem like there's any minhag ha'olam. That's why I couldn't. There's no consensus on this. There's mamish no consensus, and there's fights every way. So I'm just saying the tzad that I like the best, because there is no establishment of ha'olam on this. I asked Reb Borofsky, who I learned Hilchos Nida by, he agreed that there is no consensus on the Shaila. Okay, Yom HaChodesh, yeah? So once Yom HaChodesh passes without a Re'iyah, that day is Oiker and you don't have to worry about it. Next, Vesta Flaga. Vesta Flaga is the interval, the amount of days between one vest and the next vest. How many days were in between, and you count that many days to the next Re'iyah. And let's say you saw one day you saw 29 days later during the day, so you count 29 days later during the day, and that's going to be when the vest will be. Now, one thing that gets a little complicated is we use what I call Jewish counting. Jewish counting is inclusive. So when you saw on the 5th of the month, that 5th of the month is day 1 in the counting. And it gets a little confusing that way, but that's how we count. If you ever notice, it's like a bris. A baby is born Monday morning, so we have the bris on the 8th day. When do we have the bris? On Monday morning. Wait, isn't that 7 days later? So once again, Jewish counting, it's the 8th day, and it's an inclusive counting, which is interesting why we sometimes do it and sometimes not. Your sister-in-law had a baby boy, and then your wife had a Re'iyah that day. So you're going to say, oh, great, oh, interesting. So I'll just remember the Oina Baininess, the 30 is going to be on the day of the Pidyon Aben. No, it won't. If you had it on a Monday, the Oina Baininess is going to be 4 weeks later and Tuesday. Whereas the Pidyon Aben, which uses real counting, not Jewish counting for whatever reason. So the Pidyon Aben, which is on the day 30, is going to be on Wednesday. So it's a little complicated. By the way, as a side point, if you're following what I'm just saying, the Chavas Das doesn't really hold 31 days for the Oina Baininess, as we're going to get to. The Chavas Das, the Gemara says, Stam Nashim Roya Melamed Lamed. And everybody agrees it's a 30-day interval to the Benavis. Just the Chavas Das doesn't use Jewish counting. The Chavas Das uses regular counting. And that's why in Jewish counting, the Chavas Das is 31 days. Now, fine. So the Vest Haflaga. Now, if you had a Haflaga of 27, and then following that you had a Haflaga of 29, so therefore, now you already been Oiker of the 27, you passed the 27, the 27 doesn't count, and now you had 29, and the following month you're going to have to keep 29, right? And once again, you're only keeping the Ainah, the 12-hour period that you saw on. So if you saw it during the day, you keep the day, you saw it at night, you keep the night. We'll get to Or Zeruas, etc. in a minute. Now, here's the question. What if you saw 29 in the first month? You had a flug of 29, and then after that, you had a flug of 27. So obviously, the following month, you have to keep a flug of 27. You have to count 27 days. First interval was 29 days. The following interval was 27 days. You obviously have to keep 27 days from the last time you saw. Now, the following month after that, what are you marking in your calendar? So you're obviously marking I'm Choshesh for 27 days from now. What about 29 days? On one hand, my most recent interval was 27. So that's what I'm Choshesh for. My most recent interval was 27. On the other hand, I've never proven that 29 days doesn't cause her to see. Maybe 29 maybe there's two germs. Maybe 27 causes her to see, and maybe 29 causes her to see. Do you have to keep 29? So Lamaisa, the Bach, the Shach, Ramosha, Dayan Padwa, all say you do not have to keep 29.
The fact that you don't see 2 days after 27 does not prove that it's not.
No, because that's not, first of all, you were probably seeing Dam during that time, right? Blood was probably flowing. Blood was probably flowing, but even without that, since you already... No, but anyways, good question. Shulchan Aruch Harav says no, but whatever, we're not going to get in there. But L'maisa, for you, it's only a flug of 2. By the time you get to that day 29, you're not at 29, you're at 2. Because every time the woman has her Aschal Sriya, it restarts the count. So when you get to that point, you never got to 29. You got to 27, and now you're at 2. Or 3 with Jewish counting, if you don't get too confused. Okay, so L'maisa, you've never proven 29 doesn't cause you to see. So do you have to keep 29 as well the following month? So there's the famous Shita, depending on who you are. By the way, what I just said now of only keeping 27 and not 29, that is what's taught on American soil outside of Lakewood. You keep 27, you do not keep 29. That is in general. And by the way, that's also what's usually taught in Rechavia soil as well, which has a Yikzer Shabbat American soil. Now, huh? Not Hasidish. Yes. So what about, does everybody agree to this? So the answer is no. There's really a lot of people that say it, but it goes, I'll shame the base mayor. The base mayor says not only you have to keep the 27-day interval, you also have to keep the 29 interval, because you never proved that you aren't goyim to see in 29. As I said, in America, most people never heard of this. In Eretz Yisrael, it's Moshe, Emes, V'Sarasay, Emes, base mayor's vest, and obviously you keep it. It's pashut. It's it's what they learn. Pashut, nothing to discuss. And in Lakewood as well, it's pashut, nothing to discuss. Everybody keeps the base mayor's vest. In American soil and in Rechavia, I think most of the people are not taught this base mayor's vest. Now, do you have to keep it or do you not have to keep it? Well, listen. Rav Yashiv says you have to keep it. Shevet Levi says you have to keep it. What do I say? I say, do however you're taught. Do however you're taught. Now,
would this be the same halacha as what you said before with the lamed?
With the lamed, what do you mean?
As far as the same, very similar halacha.
I'm not sure what you're referring
The
to.
lamed that you're missing the day.
Oh, no, over here there's a lot of hak. The Rishonim discussed this already. This is a machlekes Rishonim through the Achronim to the Shulchan Aruch. This is the pashtus of the Ramah is that the Ramah is machmer for this. That is the pashtus, by the way. The Shach says not to be machmer. The Ramah doesn't say mefurish, but the mashmois of the Ramah is that you have to be machmer for this. So it's not a new shayla. Now, one thing to point out, even for those that keep the base mayor, it gets very complicated. So you have that long haflaga. When could you stop counting it? Does it last forever? Or is there, after you saw less than that 3 times in a row, maybe you don't have to keep the long haflaga anymore. So this is a big Rav Yashiv. He started one way and then he switched his opinion the other way, and the Shmuas in every direction. The Shevet Levi says Sarachian. He ends up concluding that after 3 times the minhag is that you stop keeping the long haflaga. Another big machlokes, which is also very unclear in the Beis Meir, is let's say you saw 29 night, right, and then 27 day. What are you choishish for in the upcoming? If you keep the Beis Meir, are you choishish for 29 night or 29 day? Do you go by the original 29 was a night riyah, or do you say right now her last riyah was a day, so you're choishish for the day? It's also a big fight. Shevet Levi says tzarachian as well, but Lamaisa he concludes that we should keep the day one, meaning the most recent riyah. Even
the whole idea is that you weren't okay with the previous best.
yeah, I actually agree with you. That for me that was the pashtus. The idea is right now we see that the day is what's going on. I agree with you in Svara. Yeah, I agree with you in Svara, but Lamaisa the Shevet Levi says he says tzarachian and he says to be noyig the second way, not this way. I happen to agree with you. I heard a theory from Callis. I think it makes a lot of sense. That he said that from the fact that there's such a lack of clarity with the Beis Meir about what you actually have to keep, it seems to be a raya that the minhag in Klal Yisrael wasn't to keep the Beis Meir. If the minhag in Klal Yisrael was to keep the Beis Meir, there probably would have been a clear mesorah as to what exactly to keep. And from the fact that it's so confused and so unclear, it's a theory. He doesn't say it as a psak, but his theory is that the minhag was probably not to keep the Beis Meir. Okay, one more thing or two. We're running short on time. Okay, let's just finish this off. Now, fine. Now, there's a concept. The Shulchan Aruch says that one needs to keep only the 12-hour period. The Shach brings the Chumrah of the Or Zarua, which is keeping the 12-hour time frame before the Riyah. So if it was a night Riyah, to keep the 12 hours before in the daytime, and if it was a day Riyah, to keep the 12 hours before of the night. Now, there's 2 ways of explaining it. Once again, there's a chashash that either maybe it will come early, or maybe the tashmish will be goyim it to come early, and therefore you have to be parish. And this is just going to be pre. We're not going to have any chumras whatsoever. It's just going to be tashmish, which will be aser. Now, there's something very, very strange here. The Maisa, the Or Zarua, it's not brought. It's rejected by the Shulchan Aruch. It's rejected by the Taz, rejected by the Torah Shlomim, rejected by the Chavas Das, rejected by the Sidrei Tahara, rejected by the Chachmas Adam, rejected by the Aruch HaShulchan, and the Chazon Ish in print rejects it. Even though they say he told Yorei Shemayim to be machmer on that, people bring it as a whole big stira. I think it's like not a stira in the slightest. He holds that you don't have to be machmer on it. There are a couple of Anshe Skula, a couple of tremendous Yorei Shemayim, which doesn't mean every single person in Haredi society that he told to keep. But in general, he held not to keep it. I think it's pashas, not a stira in the Chazon Ish. So the Maisa just with this, for whatever reason, which is kind of strange, the minhag ha'olam has become to keep the Or Zarua. The minhag ha'olam has clearly become, for some reason, in the last 70 years, the minhag ha'olam has become, it's nachroinim, it's totally rejected. And for some reason, a theory that I heard as to why this, because you learn through the sugya, it doesn't make any sense. So, it used to be people saw at set times, and their bodies were kavua. So therefore, the Or Zarua was a chumri yasera. Perhaps nowadays, since things are so unset and so mivabal and whatever, and things are so unreliable, so therefore nowadays we're machmer for the Or Zarua. I don't know why it is, but l'maisa we're machmer for the Or Zarua. That's what the consensus of the Paiskim are. But one thing to note, if there's ever a matzav where there's a suffix about keeping the Or Zarua, it's a suffix day of the vest, it's a big need, it's a yotzil derech, it's a leil tefillah, etc., you can be make all in the Or Zarua. Yeah, 27, 29, whatever it is, you can always be make on the Or Zarua in complicated days, and have a great day. We'll take this up next week.